let's get back into this. The birds and bees of vector graphics. So if you look at the assignment, I have this methods of reproduction section. So the most straightforward way is by grouping. So let's say our first couple here is ready. Mating season has begun. So this is how the reproduction happens. You use your selection tool and you select both of your parent objects. You can do that by clicking one, shift clicking the other, or dragging a marquee around both of them so that it touches both of them. And then you hover over one or the other as if you're ready to click and drag to move them together. So when you hover over one or the other, you should see a move tool appear. It looks like an arrow head without the tail, and the little bounding box icon will appear. You don't want to be in the middle, because in the middle the tool is ready to select. Actually, it's not ready to move. If I click and drag in the middle, it's just going to reselect something. It's not going to actually move anything. So I want to be in a position where I'm ready to move my objects, so when I drag on them, they move. But what I really want to do is duplicate them. So I can hover over one object or the other, hold down on the Option key, and then you'll see a little duplicate icon appear. Oh, I zoomed way in. I'm going to do Command minus to zoom back out. And so I want to see the duplicate icon, and then I'm going to hold Option, click and drag out, and release my mouse, and then release the Option key. If you release the Option key too soon, you'll end up just moving. So if I am trying to duplicate these objects, for example, and I hold Option and I drag and I release Option before I release my mouse, I'm not going to be duplicating, I'm just going to be moving. Okay, so then recombining, methods of reproduction. I'm starting with grouping. Very simple process here. You just use your own aesthetic judgment to pair the objects together one way or another, select them and group them. You can select your objects by clicking on one, shift clicking the other, and then go Object Group, or Command G if you're on a Mac, Control G if you're on Windows. You can also change the shape. Like, okay, this looks like a guy with a little pointy hat on, little birthday hat on. So I could do that. Or I can align them. You can use the smart guides will appear if you have your smart guides checked on to help you line an object up to another. But if sometimes the smart guides are a little temperamental or kind of fiddly to work with. So you can always use the Align panel. If you select more than one object, in Properties, you will have Align options appear automatically. So I can check what I'm aligning to. Align to Selection is checked, and then I can center align, horizontal align, center the objects to each other, and then I could group that, and that could be a baby. Or I could try something different, like maybe I want it to look like a pyramid with a sun setting behind it. So in that case, maybe I want to select the two objects again, align them, and group them. Command G to group, and then that could be a baby. And you could do that as many times as you'd like to make new babies. Scaling it down a little bit. I have in my preferences, if you go to Illustrator Preferences General, you can check your preferences to see that if scale, strokes, and effects, I like that to be checked, and scale corners, I like that to be checked, because as you scale things down, as I scale my objects down, I want my effects and my strokes to scale down with the size of the object. So let me just show you what happens if this is not checked. So if I duplicate this out and then I were to scale it way down, notice that the size of the effect and the size of the strokes stay the same, even though the object is much smaller. But let me go back and to preferences and general and check scale, strokes, and effects and click OK. And now let me just duplicate this out. Now if I were to scale this, now that I have scale, strokes, and effects checked, as I scale the object down, the strokes are going to get finer and thinner with the size of the object, and the effect is also getting smaller with the size of the object. So I like that better, so that the strokes scale down and the effects scale down proportionally with the size of the object. But that's just a preference that you might want to set. I'm going to delete these two though, and I'm going to duplicate these two. So besides grouping, another method of reproduction I'd like you to try is to experiment with the Pathfinder panel. And not to be confused with the Pathfinder effect. I want you guys to try the Pathfinder panel. So whenever you select more than one object, just like the align options, the Pathfinder options are going to appear in properties as well, and you can click on the little dot 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 button to bring up the whole Pathfinder panel. But I like the Pathfinder panel so much for this exercise, I want to just have it floating. So I'm going to just go to Window and bring up Pathfinder and have it float. So for this, I would align my objects. And the nice thing with when you bring up Pathfinder as a floating panel, it comes tabbed with the align panel, so they work really nicely together. There's also the transform panel here. But if I wanted to make sure that these objects were centered to each other, I could do that with align to, selection, set, and then horizontal. They're already aligned to each other because the smart guides helped me out there. So I'm going to select these two by dragging a marquee over both of them, and I'm going to go into Pathfinder. And with Pathfinder, you've got two rows of buttons. You've got the shape modes and you've got the Pathfinders. I'm going to start with the shape mode. So with the shape modes, these buttons, there are 4 buttons here. They're unique because you have 2 different ways to apply them. You can just click or you can option click. Let's figure out what the difference is between just clicking and option clicking. So so this first button, it's called the Unite button.
Sorry, Professor, for the interruption.
Oh, no worries.
What is option? Is that for Mac laptop, or we can use that on any other laptops?
Oh, option is the same as the Alt key. So
Alt key.
Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that. Yes, that if you're on Windows on a PC, you can use the Alt key instead of the option key. You're welcome. Thanks for bringing that up to my attention. So yes, so with these buttons, you have the option to just click the button, or if you're on a Mac, you can option click the button and you'll have different results. Or if you're on a PC, you can Alt click the button, because Alt and option are the same key. Just option on a Mac, Alt on a PC on Windows. Okay, so if I just click the Unite button, watch what happens. I'm not going to hold down any key now, just clicking. Hey, what did I create? What does that look like? Now, I created a new shape by combining the circle and the triangle into one new shape. This is what I could have done when I was creating clouds with the ellipses. I could have just selected all those ellipses and just clicked the Unite button, and with one click made my cloud. Made one simple cloud shape. But let me undo that. Command Z. Well, before I undo that, what happened though? The triangle and the circle came together to form what? Can anyone tell me what this shape looks like?
A key?
A keyhole, yeah. It looks like I lost the shadow though in the process. So that's one thing that will happen with Pathfinder, is that it doesn't always retain certain things like strokes and shadows and effects. So that's one thing to look out for, but it's okay if that happens, because this is all an experimental process and exercise for learning. So I'm gonna undo that, Command Z. So I undid that. Now I'm gonna go through the steps again. So you arrange your objects, and then you select your objects together, all your objects, and then you either click the button or option click the button if you're on a Mac, or alt click the button if you're on Windows. This time I'm going to option click the button. Did anyone notice any difference in what happened this time? Before, did we see this overlapping area of paths, where you see the top of the triangle and the bottom of the circle? That wasn't there before, right? It was just a keyhole outline. So when you just click the shape modes, you're combining the two shapes into a new shape, and it's final. When you option click or alt click the shape modes, the original two shapes, the paths of the original two shapes, or the original shapes that you're combining, are going to be retained, so that you can still have access to moving those shapes apart from each other to make alterations in a much more neat way, so that everything will stay nice and neat and symmetric. So I like to use a tool that's underneath the direct selection tool, which is called the group selection tool, to make alterations, because once you combine shapes using any of these buttons in Pathfinder, you'll have a group, and I don't want to spend the time to ungroup the objects, especially with not in this situation, where what has happened was, if I look in layers, it's created when you option click or alt click the shape modes, you end up creating a compound shape. The characteristics of the shape on top are given to the shape underneath, but now, because I option clicked the button, I've got these two independent shapes that I can move around if I switch to the group selection tool. So I'm going to choose the group selection tool, and the way that I can do that is I can click outside, and then I can click just the circle and move the circle around, so I can alter the shape of the keyhole. Maybe I want a short and stout keyhole like this, and then click outside and look at it and say, no, I want it to be taller. I can move the triangle. I can use the smart guide to help me to line things up. Like that. So it allows you to have access to the original shapes, and then make your adjustments, and then click outside and look at it and say, do I want the keyhole to be a little shorter? Yeah, okay. And it makes it easier to edit the shape, and then once you're happy with the overall look of the shape, then you can go back to the selection tool, select the whole compound shape, and then you finalize it by clicking on the expand button. If you don't finalize it, then the object's going to be kind of clunky and not be able to give rise to the next generation. It's going to be basically an infertile object. So it's always good to expand, because that'll allow you to have a simplified shape that will be defined as a path that can more easily be recombined into the next generation. So I'm going to just click expand, and it cleans up, gets rid of the additional path overlapping area, and draws it into just a simple keyhole shape route. So it's no longer a compound path, it's a path. Or a compound shape, sorry, it was a compound shape. When I option click on the shape modes, it creates compound shapes. So I'm gonna just do that again by selecting these objects, option dragging these out, make another baby here, and then this time I'm gonna rotate this shape here and adjust it like that. Can anyone guess what I'm about to make here yet? I'm gonna select these two objects here by drag selecting over them. And if I click the next button here, the next shape mode, I could just click, or I could option click or alt click. I'm gonna click. Hey, what does that look like?
Pac-Man.
Pac-Man, yeah. So if I'm happy with that, I could just move on and do something else. But I'm gonna undo that, because let's say I wasn't sure, because looking at the objects like this, I'm not exactly sure what the Pac-Man mouth is going to look like. I want to use this button that's called minus front, which is basically taking a bite out of the shape behind with using the shape in front and making the shape in front disappear. This time I'm going to hold option and option click the minus front button. So you see the difference. So you see the difference? You'll still have access to the original two shapes here. The circle and the triangle path are still intact. So then I can use my group select tool, click outside to deselect, and I can move the triangle around and try to remember, what did Pac-Man look like? Think back to the 80s. Did Pac-Man have a little cute dainty mouth like this? Or maybe he was hungrier. Maybe he had a really big mouth. Sometimes maybe he did. Or maybe kind of in between. So it allows me to be able to kind of play with the positioning of the shapes and then click outside and look until I get it just right. And then I click outside and look and say, okay, that's the Pac-Man I want. So then I go back with my selection tool, click, select the whole compound shape that has been created, and what do I do to clear away these extra paths I don't need now? How do I get rid of the original shaping and make a new shape that's just the Pac-Man?
Click expand.
Right, very good. So you click expand in Pathfinder, and then it cleans it up, makes a nice, neat little Pac-Man shape. The only problem is that if I wanted the drop shadow, I could have retained the drop shadow by just clicking this button, because I don't know if you noticed, but the drop shadow remained when I just clicked, but when I used option click, it got rid of the drop shadow. So then I'd have to add it again if I wanted it later. But it's fine. Some characteristics don't have to carry across to the next generation. Okay, so let's move on to these objects and see if we can, so these two, this couple's ready to make babies. So I'm going to select these two and option drag them out to duplicate them and then combine them in different ways here. And let's see what we can create next. So I'm going to select the two, align them to each other. Okay, they're lined up. And then I'm going to move on to the intersect button. What do you guys think intersect's going to do? Intersect should remove everything outside of the overlapping area and just keep the overlap. Let's see if that works here if I click intersect. Yeah, except the only problem is that it didn't work so well with that in this situation. I mean, it's okay, like that could be a baby if I like it, but it uses the shape that's on top to be the only shape that's left. I'm gonna undo that and try intersecting by option clicking or alt clicking there. That could give me more interesting results. So what it's doing is it's retaining so notice that when you just click a button versus option clicking or alt clicking, you're going to have different results. Now it's retaining the overlapping area and hiding everything outside of the overlapping area. That's what intersect does. Then from there I can kind of play with that and use my group selection tool and select a certain shape and move it around and create an offset maybe that could be interesting. Maybe I can access the circle here and move that up and do something like that. Maybe I like that. And when I'm happy with that, I can just say, okay, I like that, so I'm going to select this whole object with my selection tool. It's a compound shape, and I just want to simplify it now, so I click expand to get rid of all the extra paths. Okay, so there's a baby, and now I'm going to duplicate these two here and put these together differently. And you can try putting a different object on top. So maybe I want the ellipse to be in front, so I can select the ellipse and go to arrange, bring to front. So now the ellipse is in the front. I can select these two objects, align them to each other so they're centered to each other. Let's see, center. I guess I just eyeballed it right. Let me select this star and make it bigger by holding Shift and Option and scaling out. So it scales out from the center. Or maybe I'll make it really big and see what happens. So then I'm going to select these two here and go to Pathfinder. And so now with this button, exclude, what should happen is the area that's overlapping should become a cutout, and everything outside of the overlap should remain. So let's see if that happens. So if I'm just gonna click and see what happens. Just click. Ooh, I like that. So I like just clicking on that one. So I'm just gonna scale that down. I'm holding Shift and keep that as one of the babies. Exclude. So that's gonna be a baby. Like that, and then I'm gonna duplicate these out here. Oops, that panel was in the way. Duplicate these out, and then I'll do this again. I'm gonna just scale this down a little bit and bring it to the front. Arrange, bring to front, and then I'll center these objects to each other with the align panel, horizontal and vertical. And then now I'm gonna try in Pathfinder, I'm gonna try option clicking exclude, or you can alt click exclude. Okay, so that is what that happened now there. And because I option clicked, I can then take my group selection tool and move the original shapes around and try different things, moving this shape. And because I outlined my stroke, then it makes it kind of fun to offset the stroke shape from the other shapes to create interesting new shapes. And I can move this around in some way and create some interesting new formations. The circles in here, I can move that around and make something cool. Maybe move this down a little bit, or up or down. What looks better? It's hard to tell. Maybe it was good right here. Okay, so I'll go with that, and then once I'm happy with it, I can select the whole thing and click expand, and then it simplifies it, and I can scale it to what I want it to be. And then now it's time for this generation to make some babies. So let's say Pac-Man meets the pink hat. So again, you can always just select your objects, option drag them out, and arrange them in funny ways, interesting ways, and select them and then group them and call that a baby there. Or use the Pathfinder option. So I'll put them together and I'll align them, and then I'll go to Pathfinder. And so I went through all the shape modes. Let's experiment now with the other Pathfinder. So I encourage you to just experiment with these buttons by duplicating the objects out, overlapping them in some way, selecting the objects that are overlapping, and then just applying these buttons by clicking on them. For the Pathfinders, there's no option clicking or alt clicking. It's all just final. You just click and then something's going to happen. So let's see what happens when I click divide. So I got my objects selected and overlapping. I'm going to click divide. Okay, let's see. Did you guys notice anything that happened there? What happens is it will group the object. Another thing that happened with divide is where there was an overlap, that becomes its own little shape. So if I go with my group selection tool, I can select the overlapping shape has been divided into its own little shape. So I can select that shape and I can move it, put it somewhere else. Maybe it's going to be like his neck. And then now when I go back to the selection tool and I select this, it's all going to be stuck together as a group. If I wanted to just delete this part, I can always select a part and then delete. It's like brain surgery. Just delete it, or I could put it somewhere else and offset it. I'll just select it and delete it. So now I made a little cutout there. That's what divide does. Anything that's overlapping becomes its own little shape. Okay, now I'm going to select these two again. Option drag them and say they want to have another baby. So maybe I'll do something a little different. Maybe put this here. Select these two. Maybe select these two here. And then I'm going to try this button, trim. What do you think trim is going to do? Ooh, so trim, what did it do? Did you notice what it did? It removes the strokes. That's one thing that it did. Another thing is anything that was underneath, any path that was underneath the object on top disappeared. So instead of creating a little division in the overlap like divide created, trim just removes anything underneath. So now I can use my group selection tool and select this shape and move it apart. And you'll see there's nothing underneath this shape anymore. There's no little overlapping section. And I can just move this and create a little offset. I can move this out and see, ooh, I like that. See what it did? What trim does is it cuts out what was underneath. So it made a little cutout in the Pac-Man. I could put this on the top of the Pac-Man like it's a little hat now. And then when I go back to the selection tool, all this is a group. So I can put that there. So that's a little guy there. A practical use of trim would be like what you were doing last week. You were making landscapes. Let me just make a quick landscape. I'm gonna go to my properties and so I'm gonna make a very quick landscape just to show you. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted the ellipse. So let's say there are some gray clouds here. I'm gonna just use swatches. So some gray clouds here. And I'm just going to duplicate, and then I'll make another big green hill here. Okay, so this is just a rapid fire landscape here, but just to show you, a practical use of trim would be if you wanted to trim off the edges of your landscape. You could use a rectangle and draw a rectangle along the side of your landscape. It doesn't matter what color it is. It can be red, it can be whatever. And then you select any shapes that you want to trim the edges, trim off the edges. And then you select the rectangle with anything that you want to trim. and then you just click on the trim button. And did you see it removed the paths underneath the rectangle? But it puts it together as a group. So these objects are grouped to this rectangle. I'm going to undo that. So what I want is to remove the rectangle. So I take the group selection tool, click outside to deselect, click the rectangle, press delete. And it made a nice straight edge along the landscape. So I could do that on the other side too. Let me just move this down here. So I can take a rectangle, draw along the edge, and I can just select everything here, and then trim. Then I take my group selection tool, click outside, click the rectangle, press delete. If I want a straight edge along the bottom, I just draw my rectangle along where I want a straight edge, select the whole thing, and trim. And it will remove the path underneath, so then you can deselect and use your group selection tool just to select the rectangle on top and press delete. So that's a practical use of trim. Okay, but let's moving on here. I'm going to show you another. You can go through and experiment with the rest of these Pathfinder buttons on your own. It's just the same process of duplicating out objects, overlapping them in some ways, selecting the objects, and then clicking to try out the buttons, see what happens. It's just fun to do. Another method of reproduction I have here after experiment with Pathfinder, use Shape Builder. You saw me do that last week, so I'm not going to do that again. Use the blend feature. So let's see what happens with blending. So I'm going to go in here and let's say I select these two objects here, the Pac-Man and the keyhole get together. So I duplicate them out. I think I'm going to put Pac-Man in front of the keyhole. So I'm going to right click, arrange, bring to front. And there are a few different ways of blending. I want to show you blending now. So you can select your objects that you want to blend together, and then you can go to Object, Blend, Make, and it blends one object into another, creating a multitude of in-between shapes. But I like to have a little more control over my blend. So then I'm going to go to Object, Blend, and then Blend Options. And then instead of Smooth Color, which is what it defaults to, I can choose Specified Steps. And it put 254 intermediary shapes that gradually transition from the appearance of one to the other object. That's a little much for me. I'm going to go down to 20 and preview it so you can see better what's happening, where it's like a gradient where one color blends into the other, but in this case it's one object gradually blending into the other object. And there's a path that the objects blend on, and then you can set the orientation of all the in-between shapes to be oriented to the page or to the path. I'm going to just leave it at that, oriented to the page, and click OK. Then you can use your group selection tool to click outside and select the original shapes and move them around to create a new interesting form. Or you could use your direct selection tool to find the end point on the path and click on one point or another. You can also use the pen tool to add a point in between the path. When you hover over the path that the objects are blending on, you'll see what do you see appear? A plus. So you can click to add a point. And then with your direct selection tool, you can move that point to create a bend in your blend to create some kind of more interesting formation here. And if you want to curve that point, you can use to click and drag onto a point to make it curve. So now I have a curve. Or you can click the point to remove the handles to go back to a straight line between just a straight line corner. Or if I don't want that bend in my blend, I can go back to my pen tool and hover over the point, and I'll see a minus appear, and I can click to remove that point completely. Another way to create a blend is using the blend tool. So you can always, once you create a blend, if you change your mind, you can always go to Object, Blend, and then you can choose Release. You could also expand it, but if I choose Release, it'll take me back to the two original shapes. It leaves the path that it was blending on. I can just delete that path. And then another way to create a blend is, instead of selecting the objects and then going to Object, Blend, Make, instead of that method, you could just have the objects deselected. That's the key. You have to have the objects deselected or it won't work. And then you can use the Blend tool by selecting the Blend tool, and then you click on one object and you click on the other, and it makes a blend. Now again, I need to go back to my blend options, blend options, and go back to specified steps, and 20 is my number I like. I'm going to just go with that. And then I can use my direct selection tool, click on an endpoint, move this around in some way to make a new little baby. That's a combination of Pac-Man and the keyhole. Okay, so that they had this baby. So I guess the plot is thickening here. It's becoming a soap opera. It didn't work out with Pac-Man and the magenta hat, so Pac-Man got together with the keyhole now. Okay, let me move over these babies. You can also scale the babies down so they fit. If there's a baby that you don't like as much, you can always select it and abort it. Delete it. Well, let me bring it back. It came back to life. It's okay. It's all vector graphics. It's all experimentation on vector graphics. No living organisms are actually harmed in this experiment. Okay, so I'm going to select the Pac-Man and the keyhole, duplicate. Actually, I'm going to go back to Pathfinder and show you another method. I'm going to duplicate this Pac-Man out a bunch of times and make a quick Pac-Man pattern to show you a practical use of a button I like to use, which we're going to be using when we work with repeating patterning for our first project. I'm going to talk about the crop button in Pathfinder. So crop is great if you have a pattern and you want to crop a pattern into a shape. So I'm going to do that with this. So I'm going to just duplicate Pac-Man out, make us a line of Pac-Man here, and I can, like, if they were not lined up, I can select them all, use my align options, and like align their tops or center align them to each other. Vertically works, and then I can distribute the spacing evenly with distribute objects, and then I want to group this, so I'm going to hit Command G to group this so it all sticks together as a row. And then actually I'll just Option drag out a bunch of these. And then I'll just select them all. Select them all. And I'll line them up to the left edge, and then I'll distribute the spacing vertically, and maybe just for fun I'll take a rectangle and make a background blue color and send that to the back. Right click, arrange, send it back, and then I have a pattern that I can put this keyhole shape onto. So I'm going to drag out this keyhole. I'll just scale it up. And so let's say I want to crop this pattern out in the shape of the keyhole. So I select everything here, and then I'm going to click on, in Pathfinder, crop. So there you have it. Then I have this little keyhole shape, but Pathfinder doesn't tend to like strokes, so it got rid of all my strokes. If I want to add the stroke back again, I can do that. Let me just add a black stroke on there so it has more definition. So that's a practical use of crops. So I'm going to say this Pac-Man and keyhole made this baby here and made this blend, and this one, poor thing, didn't get together with anyone. And then let's say these two get together. I'm going to option drag these out and put these together in some way. Select them all. Use my align panel to center them to each other if I need to. Pathfinder, I could try, let's see, merge. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Merge is kind of cool. And then maybe I'll do a similar thing with these two here. Try, let's see, putting these two together here in another way. I did crop already. Gonna center these two to each other, and I'm gonna try outline. So with outline, it just turns everything into strokes that you can change the color on, and just it's a quick way to make line art. Then maybe I'll increase the weight on the strokes. And the cool thing is, then I can select with my direct selection tool or my group selection tool, I can select parts of the strokes and then maybe play with the thickness on one, or the color, change the color. Oops, it's just giving me, let me turn off the fill on that. Bring up the stroke to the front, and I can change the color of that stroke and the thickness and the color, and I can just kind of select certain pieces here and control those pieces individually and give them different colors and thicknesses and build some line art. Maybe thicken that one up. Give that a color here. And then let me just hold shift to select these two together. Give them a color. And give that a color. And so before you know it, you'll have some interesting line art here. Let me just select all these here and kind of make these more a little thicker and darker here. There we go. Let me select this and darken and thicken that up. Okay, so that's a way to create a design with lines and control the strokes that way. And then the other one is pretty self-explanatory. Minus back, whatever shape is in the back is gonna make a cutout, kind of like minus front but in reverse. So I'll let you try those Pathfinder options out to create some interesting new forms. Okay, but now let's gotta get to